Welcome to Manlihood. As we prepare for season 9, we're helping men be even better men. Check out this excerpt from a previous episode we did with Matt Beaudreau.
I really like that question, and it is I think it's a nuanced answer. It's a multifaceted sort of answer, but where I lean towards is, and I say this with a caveat on there. So I lean towards sovereignty. It's a desire and a willingness to push towards sovereignty. And the reason I like to use sovereignty as the definition for this, and I'll say even a struggle towards sovereignty, because struggling gets a bad rap. Struggling is like, well, guys are like, oh, I'm struggling with my marriage, or I'm struggling with my. No, you're not. If you look at the definition of struggle means to violently oppose something. Right, so I'm struggling. I'm violently opposing anything that does not let me be sovereign. And in doing so, inherently, I've got to be wildly responsible. And so for me, a good man is somebody who is going to take the utmost responsibility for making sure he is understanding what the definition of sovereignty is for himself and his family. So he is taking full responsibility on his shoulders to make sure that there are no ties that they do not choose for the family. And I mean ties from any way that you can think of. So taking on that wild responsibility is I believe what I've seen good men do.
When you use the word sovereignty,
Yes, sir.
I know what you mean, but
Mm-hmm.
our listeners might say, okay, what is
Yeah.
he talking about?
Well, I always say freedom is my favorite F word, right? I love the concept of freedom and being a free man, but I think sovereign is really the better definition. So, in the most basic sense, what I mean is, I am at a point, and I've worked very, very hard to be at a point where I don't do anything I don't want to do with anybody I don't want to do, and I'm not tied to anything I don't want to be tied to. And that is what I believe, and there's a wildly massive amount of responsibility that goes along with that. And I can take care of my family in that regard. So it means if, the proverbial shit hits the fan and something doesn't work and, the grid goes down or food's not available, like, we're sovereign. We can take care of ourselves. We are sovereign from a financial standpoint. We're sovereign from a familial, the relational. Like we are choosing how we live our life, and we are not subjected to having to answer to somebody else. I don't have to answer to somebody else for work. Don't have to answer for to somebody else for as far as the government goes. As far as we just sovereignty. That's what we mean, is we get to choose who we are and who we do this life with.
I like that a lot. So if you're listening, I think that's something we all ought to be striving for. And I think it's also funny how often we aren't, right?
Man, we don't realize sometimes that how much we're tied to things. That's one of the months in particular, and I think it's month 8 in our men's program, is we take a look at self-reliance and sovereignty, and we take a look at where are you still tied down. And we have this concept of we're in a free country and we're free people, but if you are still subservient to, and again, there's nothing wrong with being a W-2 worker. There's nothing wrong with that. But at least understand that you're not in control there. And are you okay with that? What happens if, that seems secure, but the more you seek security, the less you actually have. So what happens if something happens to that company? What happens if some of the most secure jobs all of a sudden go away, and now what? You don't have ultimate control over that, right? So what does that look like? What does it look like with your finances? If you are paying 40% of your money's going out in taxes, well, you're not sovereign there. You're not in control. If you have to rely on a grocery store for anything and everything, well, you're not sovereign there. What happens if stores shut down? Would you be able to survive? Are you good? If not, okay. I'm not saying that's fine. But now what? So understand where you're not really sovereign, and then you have to make the decision, do I want to struggle to work towards that sovereignty. And again, that's up to each individual. We don't tell anybody what they have to do. We just want to make people aware of where they are and what opportunities there are to get educated and move themselves forward.
Thanks for tuning into Manlihood. Season 9 is on the way.